Welcome to Mid-Range Madness Basics. I'm going to try and run through a few small videos just on the basics of flying mid-range to long range with mini quads. There's information out there, some of it's scattered over groups, bits and pieces in videos that people have posted, but I just thought I'd try and put together a little series just talking on the basics, especially for people just getting in to or looking at flying mid-range to long range with their mini quad. First thing we're going to look at is the control link. Myself, I use the Crossfire Micro TX. Now this is only capable of 100 milliwatts, but that's still quite a lot of power, and for the flying that I do, I find it more than adequate. So far I've only been out 3.5 kilometres is the furthest I've gone out, with a round trip of around 7 to 8 kilometres. Most of my flying is done within a range of 1.5 to 2 kilometres, with a round trip of around 5 to 6 kilometres. But a lot of the time when I'm out flying, I'm quite low to the ground. I can be 1.5 to 2 kilometres out, and I might only be 5-6 feet off the ground. Even at 3.5 kilometres out, I might be 20 feet off the ground at times. One of the big things to look at with this system is, especially when you first get started, is what frequency to run. The Crossfires are capable of running two different frequencies. One of them is 868, which is for people in European countries. Other countries like America and Australia run 915 megahertz. Now if you set up your radio wrong, chances are you're going to get fail safes, you're going to have your quad fall out of the sky, you're going to have a lot of telemetry issues. If you try and run that the wrong frequency, there's things like phone towers and that using those frequencies, and it might seem fine for a little while, then all of a sudden you might only be 50 metres, 100 metres out, you could be 500 metres out, and all of a sudden your quad will just fall out of the sky. So with these, there's a few different antenna options. The Micro TX comes with this antenna. It's like the Immortal T. Some guys use this still and find it better if they're, say, flying mountains where they've got quite a fair bit of elevation to climb. I myself even found, if I was up a bit of distance in the air, that this was possibly better than the Diamond for that. The Diamond antenna, however, I've found for myself is quite often, if I'm out that 1.5 to 2 kilometres and I'm only a few feet off the ground, the Diamond for myself seems to work better. You'll probably see too that I've got mine in a horizontal position. For myself, I find it works very well. The only time I can have issues is when maybe I'm out some distance and I bank and the ends of the antenna can point down to the ground, and that way it's not in line, no longer in line with my antenna on the radio, plus it's also pointing at the radio at the end, which you get a bit of a null zone. Now in saying that, when that happens, quite often it's only for a second or so that you'll see the link quality drop, or you might get a warning to say that the quality has dropped. Some people prefer to mount it vertical. Personally myself, I've found it hard, especially on the quadcopter, to try and mount the antenna vertical. There's not a lot of wire that comes with the Immortal T to connect it to the receiver. You'll also see on my quad that this is horizontally mounted, and that needs to be matched to your radio. You don't want one horizontal and the other one vertical. some people prefer to run the standard antenna that comes with the micro RX, and they'll run it in an L configuration like so. So they've got one of them vertical and the other one sticking straight out, and they tend to find that works really well. One thing you want to be careful of if you're going to use these antennas is this is the original one, and it's got black heat shrink in it, and I believe this one was, the length of it was designed for Europe, so 868 megahertz. The later ones have got grey heat shrink. These ones have been shortened. I believe it's around 15 millimeters or 7.5 millimeters off each end. You can do the same to this if you want to cut it down. I would do a bit more of a search, but I'm pretty sure it's 15 millimeters or 7.5 millimeters off each end to make it for 915 meg. The next thing I want to talk about is looking at our FPV feed. I quite often see people asking on videos, on forums, what people are running. Myself, I run the Impulse RC Mercury VTX, and this has a maximum power of 500 milliwatts, but it's a very clean signal. It puts out a nice clean signal, and that's really important to getting a good video. The other thing is antennas. I like to run the pagodas. I find they work really well. These ones here I make myself for a couple of dollars each. I quite often make them a bit longer on some of my other quads. I actually have them mounted vertical straight up off the top plate, and I have them up probably about 70 millimeters high to get some clearance over the top of the battery. I just like to keep some separation between the VTX antenna and the receiver antenna for the radio link. You can even see on this one I've put like a 45-degree adapter just to get it up and the angle that I like. I've actually got a mate working on designing a 3D print that has an angle built into it, so I can mount this antenna straight up out the back there without the 45 SMA. And the next thing, the other end of it, is the goggles. Some people use a ground station. I've tried a couple of cheap ground stations. Personally, I prefer my goggles. I also find that on the odd occasion where I have started to lose picture, I've been able to move my head a bit and then pick the picture back up again. I like to use a diversity module. This is the True D 3.5. I run a pagoda just for so I can get signal if I'm flying behind myself to the side of myself. But most of the time when I'm flying out distance, it's pretty much straight out. So I use a crosshair. I find this works really well. Some people use a patch. I've used patches and they do work well, but I find this just gives, for myself, a better picture. Quite often I'm flying through trees or multiple sets of trees out 1.5 to 2 kilometers, and this will generally punch through them. Like if you end up with, say, 20 trees between you and the quad, you're going to lose picture. One thing I've noticed as well, if the trees are wet, so if you've had a couple of days of rain, or it's rained that morning and you go out and fly and the trees are all wet, or they've soaked up a lot of water, that will also degrade the signal. So good antennas, good clean video transmitter.